Looks like everyone's here. Should I get started? Yep. Okay, great. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to the May 27th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. This is a special meeting and is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with State of California Executive Order number 29-20 dated March 17th, 2020. We are conducting the meeting using the Zoom platform and streaming it live on the city website and broadcasting on Comcast Channel 15, as well as via the city YouTube channel. Public members had the opportunity to submit emails to city staff. A report of all written comments was distributed to Planning Commission members via email and posted to the city's website under documents received after published agenda. That's it. Let's see, Ms. Chan, would you please take roll call?
Good evening. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Present.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Present, thank you.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Here.
Commissioner Mendel.
Here.
Commissioner Okenda.
Here.
Commissioner Stevens.
Pleased to be here.
Chair Roche.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move into the public comment period. The public comment section provides an opportunity to address the Planning Commission on items not listed on the agenda. The Planning Commission welcomes your comments and requests that speakers present their remarks in a respectful manner. Speakers wishing to address the Planning Commission should limit their comments to 3 minutes. And now I will ask Denise Chan to moderate the public comment portion of the meeting. And at the end of the public comment period, we will address any questions that come up. And remember, to anyone watching, this is just for general public comments. If you have specific comments on the item this evening, please wait until that agenda item comes up. Thank you. And Ms. Chan, if there are any speakers tonight?
Chair, there are no speakers at this point. We have one attendee that just came on. So let me read the disclosure. If you wish to speak and you are using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand button if you wish to speak. If you are streaming the meeting through Zoom on your computer but dialing in via phone, please mute yourself. Well, that doesn't, okay, I'm sorry. Please mute yourself so that there is no feedback sound during the meeting. If there is disruptive feedback or excessive noise during the meeting, your audio will be disabled. All right, Chair, at this time, nobody has raised their hand.
Yep, I don't see that either. Let's see. Okay. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period. Thank you. Let us move on to the first and only agenda item tonight. Well, the only development agenda item this evening. We are going to start with the proposed 3-story condominium development with 18 residential units on a lot with 4 existing unoccupied single-family homes and a garage located at 692 Berry Avenue, assessor parcel number 444-0057-033-00, requiring approval of vesting tentative map 8572, site plan review application 202003050, including an affordable housing plan with Mark Giacomo, applicant, on behalf of Basil Jacob, the property owner. And I believe we are going to hear from Senior Planner Elizabeth Blanton this evening. All right, thank you. Elizabeth, take it away.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to take a second to share my screen. Oh, looks like it's telling me the host has disabled participant screen sharing. Does somebody need to give me special permission? Oh, there we go. Ask and you shall receive. Okay, is everybody looking at my screen, seeing a PowerPoint? Okay, great. Let me put it in slideshow. There we go. Okay, so good evening, Commissioners. Elizabeth Blanton, Senior Planner. The item that we'll be reviewing tonight is an application for a tentative tract map and site plan review to allow a new 18-unit condominium development at 692 Berry Street. Now, in addition, the applicant is also proposing an alternative method of compliance with the city's affordable housing ordinance, which requires Planning Commission approval. So I'll walk through both the proposed project and the alternative housing plan in my presentation. The project site is located about a half block west of Mission Boulevard on Berry Street, which is kind of a small cul-de-sac that dead ends at the BART tracks. And CSU East Bay, just to orient you, is up the hill to the east here. Taking a closer look at the site, it comprises just over a half acre. It's located in the Mission Boulevard Corridor Neighborhood Zoning District, which is regulated by the Mission Boulevard Form-Based Code. According to the Form-Based Code, the MBCN district is intended to accommodate a mixed-use neighborhood with moderate intensity, medium-scale residential and non-residential uses along a multimodal corridor within short walking, biking, or bus distance of neighborhood-serving retail and service uses. So this site, I'll mention quickly, is within easy walking and biking distance of many locations along the Mission Boulevard corridor. And it's also located about a block or so away from bus stops that provide direct service to both of the city's BART stations, downtown Hayward, and other destinations within Hayward and beyond. The site is also located within the General Plan Sustainable Mixed Use Land Use Designation, which again envisions a walkable urban neighborhood. Currently on the site, there are 4 single-family homes and an associated garage structure, which you can kind of see in the very back here. All of the existing structures which are currently vacant will be demolished as part of the proposed project. Surrounding the site on Berry Street, there are primarily other residential uses. So there's actually several multifamily developments that are 3 stories in height located immediately west of the project site and across the street. To the east, when we get closer to Mission Boulevard, there's a mix of single and multifamily housing and some auto service businesses. And then finally, the image that you see in the bottom right corner shows the masonry wall that's surrounding the back of the Volkswagen dealership, which is directly next door to the project site. The proposed site plan shows a U-shaped building around a central courtyard with the bottom of the U fronting Berry Street. An access driveway spans one side of the building, which leads to a surface parking lot in the rear with a total of 18 parking spaces. And the tentative map basically says that all of the land that is surrounding the building will be common space operated by the HOA, while the units themselves will be condos. So looking at that, the floor plans of each level are fairly similar with 6 condominium units on each floor. The units range in size from 851 to 993 square feet. And while all the units had 2 bedrooms, some of them have 1 bathroom while others have 2 bathrooms. Some of the units, as you can see, are accessed via an internal hallway and stairs that are located in the front of the building, while others are accessed from external walkways around that central courtyard. Common open space areas include the central landscape courtyard and a landscape barbecue area to the rear of the building that has built-in picnic table seating. In addition, 9 of the units, so half of them, have private open space in the form of balconies on the upper floors and patios on the ground floor. So this rendering shows what the proposed project would look like from Berry Street. As you can see, the 3-story building incorporates varied roof lines and wall planes, projecting balconies, and a mix of wood and stucco elements to create visual interest. In addition, the site has all new landscaping, including some built-in planters, which you can see along the side of the building, and new street trees along Berry. This second rendering shows what the rear of the building looks like if you were standing in that parking lot. So here you'll see those same design elements from the street-facing facade that are carried around to the rear side of the building, as is the landscaping. Here we can see a peek of some of the short-term bicycle parking, and there's also some long-term bicycle parking to the side here. And that barbecue picnic area I shared a few slides ago is just kind of to the left of this vantage point to orient you. So as the Commission is well aware, our community, our region, and our state are in the midst of a housing crisis. In response to this, the state legislature passed SB 330, the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, which strengthened the Housing Accountability Act as an attempt to make housing production more streamlined and efficient in the state. So for us, as a local jurisdiction, a key part of this new legislation is that any new housing development projects that comply with all of the objective standards of the city's general plan and zoning ordinance must be approved. As defined by state law, an objective standard would be one that involves no personal or subjective judgment by a public official and is uniformly verifiable. So basically, in layman's terms, that means that an objective standard is a requirement that's clearly stated in the city's codes and adopted policies. Now, there are some exceptions provided within the Housing Crisis Act that says the city does not have to approve a residential project in certain cases, such as one, if the city has already met its RENA requirement, which Hayward has not, if there's a clear impact to public health and safety, if the property that's proposed to be developed is ag land, if the approval would somehow violate state or federal laws, or if the project is inconsistent with the city's zoning and general plan. So none of these, the first four exceptions here apply to this project. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at zoning and general plan compliance. So in this table, we can see a list of objective standards that apply to this project based on its general plan and zoning designations. As you can see in that column all the way on the right, the project meets all of these objective standards, including requirements related to density, lot size, building height, vehicle and bicycle parking, setbacks, landscaping, and open space. Since a couple of commissioners have raised questions about parking in advance of this meeting, I'll just highlight quickly for the benefit of the group and any member of the public that might be watching that in the form-based code area, there's no parking required. So the 18 parking spaces provided for the project meet and exceed this objective parking standard that the city has set. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, this project is also subject to the city's affordable housing ordinance. An applicant may satisfy the requirements of the AHO by providing affordable housing on site, paying an in lieu fee, or a combination of the two. So for ownership projects such as this one, the AHO requires that the applicant provide 10% of the units as affordable to moderate income households, which in this case would be a total of 1.8 units. Now, the AHO also provides applicants with the option of proposing an alternative method of compliance, which can be approved if it's determined that the alternative plan provides a greater benefit to the city than the standard compliance options would. So the applicant for this project is proposing an alternative method of compliance, and as shown on this table, rather than providing one unit that's affordable to a moderate income household and then a fee or additional unit to cover that required fractional unit, the applicant instead proposes providing one unit affordable to a very low income household, basically exchanging this deeper level of affordability for that required fractional unit. The applicant worked closely with the city's housing division to develop this alternative plan, and staff supports this plan as it provides an opportunity for home ownership for a very low income household, which is not common in today's housing market. Additionally, as you may know, the city's recent displacement study revealed that only 35% of Hayward tenants can actually afford to purchase a home at the moderate income sales price. So this helps to illustrate why the opportunity to provide ownership affordable to a very low income household is an attractive option. This project is categorically exempt from CEQA review per section 15332 for infill development that is already adequately served by utilities and public services. And as a result, no additional environmental review is required for this project. So just to quickly summarize, staff has determined that the project complies with all of the objective standards. Moreover, the project is consistent with both the existing development on Berry Street as well as the planned future development in the Mission Boulevard form-based code area. The site is located within a block of bus routes that provide easy access to BART, downtown, and other destinations. The project would be required to adhere to all building codes as well as the city's REACH code, which would require solar panels and parking spaces to be EV ready. And finally, that proposed alternative housing plan will provide a unique opportunity for home ownership to a very low income household. So with that, staff recommends that the commission approve the proposed tentative tract map and site plan review application along with the proposed alternative housing plan. This concludes staff's presentation, but I'm available for any questions that the commission may have. In addition, the project owner and architect are also available for questions, as is the city's housing manager, Christina Morales, in case the commission has any questions specifically on that alternative housing plan.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that in-depth presentation. I know that the owner, Basil Jacob, is online. Did you want to introduce yourself, and did you have a presentation for us this evening, Mr. Jacob?
I do not have a presentation, but I'd be happy to introduce. Should I go now, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, this is the right time.
Okay, hello. I'm Basil Yakub, one of the owners. I've got my partner, Mr. Kareem, here as well. His name is also showing on as mine because he's actually using my Zoom login. Both of us are on here. We're very excited to get this project off the ground here and for a very fruitful conversation tonight. And any questions you guys have, we are here for any answers.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Let's see. Okay, so we will move into commissioner questions at this time. And just a reminder, per usual, it's a questioning period of city staff or the applicant. Let's see. And I know the public might be waiting, but there will be a period for public comment after this. And with that, let me look to see if I have commissioners raising their hands. Let's see. Okay, Commissioner Ali Sullivan, why don't you go first?
Thank you very much, Chair. Hopefully a couple of quick ones here. I guess first for the city, just to clarify, and I know other commissioners have raised questions on this, the parking. I'm very surprised that there's no requirement in the Hayward Municipal Code for parking. That seems very strange to me. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm a little surprised to see that. Is there any particular reason for that?
Yeah, I can start here, and Leah, feel free to jump in if you want to provide more context. But the form-based code, which was originally adopted in 2014 and then was later revised more recently in 2019, has always had no minimum parking requirement. It does have maximum parking requirements in some cases, especially for projects that are located closer to BART. And that was in an attempt to move, this part of the city to a more urban environment. Of course, the state legislation, SB 330, has come about since we originally adopted that code. So it's something the city council might want to look at some point if, they want to adopt standards in this area. But yes, that is correct. In this area, the form-based code area in the zoning district, no parking is required for this project.
Okay, I have interesting thoughts on parking, which I can get into later. I'll save that for the moment. The second question for city, and again, by no means is this meant to be, to put you on the spot. I only was able to visit the site this afternoon. And I guess what I'm curious about is the staff reports state that the properties are unoccupied. And I went by it today and it looks very occupied to me. And so I'm curious, how the applicant plans to remove the current occupants and if the city's aware that people are living there.
I'll defer to Basil. You can go ahead and field this one. The information about the property being vacant was from when they originally submitted their application, so perhaps that's changed over time.
Sure. Yes, over time that has changed. However, the plan how to get it vacated is to give them. So first of all, we have already had a conversation with every single tenant over there to set expectations and to the fact that, hey, there will be a 6-month notice to everybody so that they can plan accordingly to what their future move out is going to be. So everybody is on notice. Pretty much everybody knows it. Everybody expects it. It's just a matter of time before we officially tell them. Okay, I'm just surprised that the city wasn't aware that that they were still operating under the assumption that it was unoccupied. So probably would have been helpful for the applicant to mention that to the city. The last question on parking for the applicant: did you consider underground parking for the site? I'm sorry, was that a question for me? It was, yes. Okay. No, we did not, because there was plenty of space, according to the architect, who's actually also, he's dialed in, so he can also jump in whenever he wants. But there was plenty of parking available, given the fact that there is no parking requirement. There was still enough parking available that we thought is going to take care of that issue. So that's why underground was not considered, as overground was available. Got it. I'll I'll pause and let some of my fellow commissioners also speak here. Might have some additional questions afterwards.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. Let's see, Commissioner Goldstein.
Thank you, Chair. There's a number of long-term bicycle parking. How many of those are being provided?
Let me take myself off mute. So let's see, I'm going back to my table. Per the code, 5 long-term spaces would be required, and 5 are provided. And this is kind of right by that barbecue picnic area. There's some kind of box sort of style lockers that you would see like at BART.
So when I park my bike, I get some free barbecue. Ignore that question.
do it.
I'm sorry. I can't help myself. I'm sorry.
There you go.
How are those? How is access to those lockers assigned or doled out? What's the method you use to allow someone long-term use of a bike locker?
Basil, I'll also defer to you for how you might manage that.
I'm going to ask my architect to jump in here. Mark?
And Mark is calling in by phone. Denise or someone else, can you remind, did you have to, oh, looks like he unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't really consider how the parking spaces would be managed. That sounds like a building management issue to me. The code required 5 long-term bicycle spaces, and so I sought to meet that requirement. And I imagine people could, pay for the spaces that they want, or sounds like a building management question.
Okay. Are they physical locks or electronically managed locks?
I haven't considered those details.
Okay.
Some of that detail likely would come in during the building permits where they look at some of these things because of the Cal Green Code a little bit more closely.
I see. Do you know, Elizabeth, off the top of your head, what the requirements might be?
In terms of how they would lock?
Yeah.
I don't. I apologize. This is out of my depth. But
That's all right. I'll follow up with you separately then. Thank you.
okay.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Bonilla.
I just have 2 quick questions. The first one is, what is considered very low income? Like, what would be the range of, that family would be needing to make to qualify for that?
Christina, I'll defer to you for that, but I believe it's up to 50% AMI.
What would that amount be for people who may not know what AMI is right now?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Give me just a second. I can give you the actual number. So a very low income household. And so for a 2-person household, the maximum income would be $54,800. And I believe this is a 2-bedroom unit. So let's assume it's a 4-person household, then the maximum income would be $68,500. So it just based on household size.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Oops.
I have a question around how you're going to get the people that are currently living there out. Sorry, I just want to follow back up on that. So I actually lived on Berry for quite some time, right up the street from this site at 747 Berry Avenue. So I'm quite familiar with the neighborhood. So during the comment section, I'll kind of have several comments to make about how the neighborhood really is versus how it was sort of portrayed during tonight's presentation. But the question that I have is, because people in that neighborhood are typically low-income folks in Hayward, and I'm assuming that the people who are living there probably don't have income just to pick up and move. Is there going to be any kind of rental assistance provided or rent relief? Or I guess, how are you going to help facilitate these families needing to leave in 6 months?
Basil, I'll defer to you for that.
Sure. The plan, as we have brought up to them, option has already been given to them about that, hey, whenever we do give you that 6-month notice, we will have this discussion on what your financial capabilities are and how we can help you facilitate to the next phase. and quote unquote cash for keys is on the table for us, and we would be willingly helping them out as much as possible to get this done.
What does cash for keys mean? I'm not familiar with that.
Helping them out with moving assistance.
Got it. I think that will be really important. Okay, those are my only questions for now. Thank you.
We've even come up with a plan to offer them a moving truck to help facilitate, so they don't have to go out and rent these things or get family members to help them do it in their cars or anything like that. Our plan is also to get that done.
Or I mean, even rent relief or something, because it'll be interesting. It's expensive to get a down payment somewhere. It's expensive to move, right? So thinking a little bit more broadly than just a truck, I think would be beneficial to these people who now are going to get evicted because we're going to rebuild there.
Yeah, that's where the cash for keys comes in. That helps them actually on the down payment plus a couple of months of rent for the next place.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Mendel.
Thank you, Chair. So questions for probably the applicant here, or maybe staff. So this is zoned as a condominium development, which means it's zoned as ownership housing, not an apartment complex, a rental apartment complex, right? So,
That's correct.
Yeah, so mention was made a moment ago that some of these questions are things that building management would sort out later. That a rental complex would have building management. Condominiums or townhomes, which is what these would be, would not. So
there would still be an HOA that's required per the conditions of approval, and the HOA management perhaps is what Mark meant to say earlier.
Yeah, so then it's up to the owners to fight over this amongst themselves and have the HOA be the arbiter of who gets those bike lockers. Yeah. All right. The parking, there's only 18 spots for 18 two-bedroom units. And without expressing any opinion about that, I will ask the applicant, is there a plan to assign one parking spot per unit, or will they be leased, unbundled from the units and leased to the residents on some sort of a lottery or whoever's willing to pay the most kind of basis? How's that going to work? That's for you, Basil.
Sure. The plan is to assign one per unit. Yes.
Okay. Any plans to incentivize people to not have a car while they're living there, or is it just relying on the free market to make sure that there's only 18 cars for 18 homes?
I think relying on relying on the fact that we are so close to public transportation and to the urban living setting of Mission Boulevard, and the fact that university is right across, I think the chances of having no cars or one per unit is probably very high.
You're an optimist. Okay. And then is there any guest parking provided at all for the development?
I'm going to defer that to Mark.
If I see staff, go ahead.
There is not. The parking that you see on the plan, there's 18 spaces.
Okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, this is a timber frame structure?
Yes, correct.
Wood frame, yes, correct.
So how do the increasing prices of lumber in 2021 and potentially into the next year, how does that factor into the economics of this development? Does it present challenges for you to actually build this and actually does it make sense to build it given current economic conditions?
Does it make sense to build it? The developer is making a business decision that it does. But I can tell you, hands down, wood frame is the least expensive and the most economical way to build.
So let me ask the question.
Far less expensive than concrete and steel. Far less expensive.
Yeah, let me ask the question a different way. So does the changes in the economy that have occurred over the last year or so, does it present challenges to add additional features into this project, or is this project sort of almost at a break even? Or is it, again, does additional elements in the project create additional risk that does not make this project worth doing?
I imagine it depends on the cost of those additional features that you're referring to. I would defer to Basel for financial related matters.
Yeah, I think I concur with Mark. It just depends on what those features are going to be. But no, we have done the numbers, and it is still economical to get this project done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead. I see, Al, you have your hand up still. Did you want to ask another question? No. Okay. So I had similar questions about parking because we've seen this before, and developments come to us, and I understand the parking requirement. But I just wanted to ask staff, when you know that there's going to be an item coming before us, and there is minimal parking, I'm wondering what your frustrations are. And I ask that because I know that this is a state requirement, that we, build as much housing as possible, parking be damned. But I remember when I was at one of the planning conferences a while ago, there was planners from all over the state complaining about this too, that the housing requirement is there, but the parking becomes a real issue and traffic becomes an issue. So I just wanted to ask staff, what is your concern and expectation? Because it's so hard to look at this and knowing that, not that I want to venture into opinion, but knowing that this is not going to be parked and it's going to be left to the owners to fight it out, and potentially renters that the owners have now leased out their units for. So I'm just wondering, what solutions are you talking about behind the scenes going forward? Because I just feel like these get built and then the owners of the properties are gone, and now it's a problem for the neighborhood, because that neighborhood has no parking. There is nothing left on the street in that neighborhood. So I'm just wondering, staff, what you deal with in the background when you're going to bring this before us and we're going to be upset about parking.
I will say, and Lee, I'll let you add in if you have different thoughts than I do, but similar, SB 330 has changed the way we review projects, and not just in planning, but for all of the different reviewing departments. There are clear instructions for folks that if we have punch list items or things that, we're telling are deeming an application incomplete, or things that need to change, they have to be specifically tied to a code item, something in the code that we can point to that's objective. So similar to all that language I gave to you guys at the beginning, I'm tied by the same language as well. So when reviewing projects, we're not necessarily having conversations with the applicant about parts of the project that do meet the code. We're having conversations of parts that don't meet the code, or parts where we do have more discretion. In terms of parking in general, I am interested to hear what the commission has to say during the discussion period. I will just say, since you asked personally, I personally live in a 2-bedroom condo. I've been a 1-car household for 10 years, so I know that there's a market for that. But again, I also hear the concern that not everybody is interested in living that lifestyle, and it might limit the potential market pool for this type of development if folks know that they would only have one assigned parking spot.
Thanks. And do you know, because we know this is a problem statewide with this requirement, are there moves on the state to address this so that it becomes more, I don't know, doable, because we're just dumping this on the neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods are having to figure it out, and that doesn't seem fair. So are there moves afoot to do this?
Good question. The state is hearing that loud and clear from local jurisdictions everywhere. I don't know, and to be fair, state legislation changes, I feel like, every 5 seconds. So I don't know if there's anything in the pipeline currently that is talking about changing this or giving some of the control back to local governments. I will say that this is making local governments rapidly respond to these changes by saying, okay, you need objective standards. We're going to really, tighten up our objective standards and make sure our standards say exactly what we want development to look like. So one project that we are doing as a city is, for example, setting up some residential design guidelines. guidelines. We have some design guidelines, but they're 30 years old, I think, at this point, and are not specific. They wouldn't qualify as objective standards. So tightening up some of that language so that we can point to those things and hold projects to it to the future. So I do know there's a lot of other local jurisdictions that are taking the same approach and saying, okay, if this is the new landscape, if we're looking at objective standards, let's be clear about what we want in our objective standards. So that's definitely something that the Commission and Council can adopt moving forward in the coming years. But again, the landscape changes constantly. So we'll see where we're at in a few years.
All right, thank you. And one of the things I'd asked about, and I understand we can't sort of require this, but, some of the, cities of the future that are looking, because I think these requirements are moving towards this carless future. But if we're going to do that, we have to admit that and offer some alternatives somewhere. And some of the designs of, some like utopia cities look at outside, parking structures somewhere else where there's off-site parking that people can buy into, that the owners have to buy a chunk of or something like that. And I'm wondering, are those things being talked about in the city? Just so I know we can't require that, but it just seems like that's what all these places are calling for at this point.
I'll say on the Mission Boulevard area, not currently, but again, that's something that we definitely could look at as a city.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions. It looks like, do you have another question, Commissioner Ellie Sullivan? Oh, and sorry, let me let Commissioner Okenda go. I didn't see your hand before. So why don't you go ahead, Commissioner Okenda?
Thanks, Chair. I had a few questions on follow-up with the tenancy situation currently. So I wish there was more information that we could have gotten in advance about this on the current updates, because I have a lot of questions that I think may require research, unfortunately. So one thing that's coming to mind right now, if you can share terms, and this is a question for the applicant, Chair, some of the terms and tenancy, forms of tenancy that you have right now on the property. Is it month-to-month stuff that you've been paying? Are there year-long leases that may have to be broken? And when was the certificate of occupancy for the property that you own that you're looking to redevelop? When was the certificate of occupancy granted on those projects? I'm having in mind, does the rent control ordinance apply here? Other kinds of forms of tenant protections that may be triggered under Hayward's code, depending on that answer. For relocation assistance, I'm specifically talking like that this is all relevant to that very point. So.
Sure. All of the leases are on a month-to-month basis. And I'm sorry, I did not understand the second part of your question.
No problem. So was the property built and issued a certificate of occupancy before July 1st, 1979 or after? And would you happen to know that information, and staff, would you happen to know that information if applicant does not?
I'll go ahead and look it up right now if you don't know, Basil.
I believe there was, one single family house was prior to 1979. Actually, I think two single family houses are prior to 1979. And I may be mistaken, so please don't quote me on that. And the others are newer built. Okay. Confirmation on that fact would be helpful. Elizabeth, thank you so much. I know you're looking at that. That's a relevant question in my mind, because I would have follow-ups related to, all our tenant protection ordinances and rent control ordinances would apply to all the tenants currently occupying that place, if depending on that question, the answer to that question and what units it applies to. And if that's the case, I think our conversation is getting a little bit more complicated for on the fly in a meeting like this. And this changes a lot of things that I'm thinking about related to my comfort, moving forward on this project. And so I guess I don't know where else to go without answers to those questions. I think the plan for the cash for keys that I was discussing about was this obviously fulfills one of those facts that gives a motivation to the tenants to be able to move and to be able to be able to afford to be able to move with those rental assistance and cash for keys, so that they've got some money in their pocket, which covers the foreseeable next few months. to wherever they're moving to, whether it's around the area or out of the area.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
I'll just add quickly. So I just pulled up the county assessor information. It doesn't provide me information building by building, but I can see it looks like the first building effective year, which usually means C of O was issued, was 1970.
Okay, well, then that seems to suggest to me that, there's maybe some more research here that we need to do to see what local laws apply to protect the tenants there from relocation. I understand that the applicant is, kind of proposing some cash for keys assistance, but I think I don't know. I'm a little uneasy around this because this is gentrification 101, and I can talk more about this in my comments, but I'll leave it there, and I'm going to probably look at some more of the city code right now while we're kind of continuing this meeting to have a better understanding of where I'm at. So thank you.
Just since we have the benefit of Christina on the line, Christina, do you have anything to add? I know not all properties that were built before the 1979 date apply, and there's like a list that housing keeps. Do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah,
sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I was thinking, should I jump in? So I'm glad you pulled me in. So the residential rent stabilization ordinance applies to this property. All components of it, which includes the rent increase limitations, which limits the rent increases to 5% per year. It's subject to eviction for cause protections. So there has to be a just cause. And just to clarify, from my understanding of cash for keys, instead of actually evicting, it would be somebody voluntarily terminating their tenancy in exchange for for this relocation package that's being provided by the developer. So they avoid the eviction process by agreeing to leave. And then we do have a tenant relocation assistance ordinance in place that would require that the developer pay at a minimum at least 1 month of the tenant's rent. However, I don't anticipate that would be much of an incentive to voluntarily leave. So to have the tenant have sufficient funds to be able to relocate, it would require a negotiation with the tenant and something that's acceptable to them.
Whoa. Thank you. Let's see, Commissioner Kenda, are you done with your questions at this point?
Yeah, just to quickly, I think, respond with an additional question. So you're just talking a little bit about the relocation assistance ordinance that we have. Would this be considered? This would be considered a faultless eviction under the ordinance, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so then we're like, just so I'm trying to be clear exactly, so I'm making sure I'm hearing what you're saying and that my understanding of the code is the same. So the cash for keys is essentially just, as you said, kind of getting around this eviction process, like requirement process and step, hoping that voluntary arrangement with the tenants can be met. And that would be like, they would feel comfortable enough taking the money to be displaced or to move and take the burden of doing that from the property and waiving their rights essentially to continue to live there or fight the eviction. Okay, so I'm just assuming that was all that I'm parroting back to you, so I understand. Okay, I can wait and see if other folks have questions, and we'll have some more to say later.
I did want to chime in really quickly based on those questions. Is there a reason why this information wasn't included in the staff report, since it seems like it was a really pertinent issue?
Yeah, the applicant in the plans that were provided, you can see it on the plans that were attached as part of attachment 4. It was explained that the buildings were vacant. So it sounds like that has changed over the course of the project, but I was not made aware of that. So I apologize. That is my error that was not included.
Thanks. And if you don't mind me just jumping on and asking Christina another question, that with the rental assistance, is there some requirement that it be within some radius of the current location so that kids don't have to move schools, people don't have to move jobs, people get to where they need to? If that's, and maybe Basil, that might be a question for you too, that we try to do something to keep people in the area. You're muted. We unmute Christina.
I muted myself and unmuted and then muted again. So no, there's no location requirements in terms of where, because it's up to the tenant to find the replacement housing. So there's no proximity requirement in terms of relocation.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Ellie Sullivan, did you have another question before we move on to public comments?
Yeah, I'm really glad I drove by the place today because it seems like a huge miss that there are people living there. On the low-income unit, the resident that moves into that low-income unit, do they have to pay the same HOA fees that the rest of the residents will have to pay, or is there any adjustment of the HOA for the low-income unit? Is for city staff, perhaps?
Christina, I don't know if that level of detail was determined within the affordable housing plan.
Well, I think it's a two-part answer. One from because the owner is going to establish what the HOA fee is. However, the price, it does affect the price. So the higher the HOA fee is, the lower the affordable sales price is. So it, to some extent, it's taken into consideration because it's factored into the affordable sales price calculation. So if they come up with a $500 a month HOA due, then the price of that unit's going to drop.
Got it. Yeah, I could easily anticipate this being, $400 a month. So I was wondering if, a low-income resident or applicant who can afford to purchase it could also afford that monthly fee as well. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a follow-up question too, Chair. Sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kenda, and then I'll go to Commissioner Bonilla. Looks like he has another question. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, so mine is, I'm familiar, because this is a rent-controlled property and this sort of triggers a vacancy decontrol process if it turns into eviction and there is no cash for keys agreement. I'm thinking, honestly, I'm wearing a hat here, like what could tenants be interested in if they knew what their full range of options are. And to me, I'm thinking about the Ellis application requirements here for this property. And this would be a rental property that's covered under rent control ordinance that's going out of business. And so vacancy decontrol matters. And that triggers, I know that you said notice of 6 months. Are you taking that from the Ellis Act rules and guidelines, or where is these kind of notices coming from? And if staff, I don't know if Christina, you'd be willing to talk a little bit about what the Ellis Act would require if that was something that had to happen. For example, tenants were not interested in taking the offer that the applicant is proposing.
So I am afraid I'm not versed in the nuances of the Ellis Act being state law, but they would have to remove it from the rental housing market. They would have to comply with the Ellis Act. Certain jurisdictions have their own local requirements as well, which Hayward does not. But yes, that would be the only way that they could remove it from the housing market.
Yeah, and so the details that I'm thinking of, and this is from my knowledge, I'm an attorney, I do some housing law. And so thinking about this, generally there are extensions and other things that apply, other protections that can be extended. This is a 6-month sort of voluntary discussion here. But there are accommodations through the Ellis Act for these sorts of evictions that can extend, this time so that tenants have up to a year, sometimes longer, to make plans, especially when, these folks that are being displaced are low income and potentially have disabilities or other things that, might be in the mix here. And so I just think there's a lot here that I'm having questions about that I feel like is like a whole nother staff report that would be helpful for the Planning Commission's consideration, if that would be something that we can return to, I guess. But with the Ellis Act question, I can stop there. So thanks for indulging those questions. I appreciate you all.
Thanks.
I'd like to.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just wanted to make a comment that, first of all, the 6-month thing just came about voluntarily by us because we wanted to give them as much time as possible. And the second thing is that we do, in fact, know that there is no low income issue over there, and that the tenants that we have are over the median income. So this, again, the cash for keys, the 6 months, and all of this simply came about because of a good relationship that we have with all of our tenants over there, and the fact that they are all aware of this and they know that they will have plenty of time and help, financial help, to move when the time comes.
Thank you. Just really quickly with Steph, if you had known ahead of time that there were people living there and there was this issue, would you have prepared a part of this report for us to understand that? Would that have been vetted ahead of time?
Yes, we could have added some language. And again, okay. I apologize. It was told to me that they were vacant at the beginning, and then that changed. I should have clarified with the applicant before the staff report.
Okay. And it is standard. That would be standard if there were people living there and there was rental assistance questions.
I'm not sure if it's standard to include it in staff reports, but I think it's reasonable to include in staff reports. So I'm hearing loud and clear that this should be in staff reports moving forward, and I can definitely make sure that the rest of planning staff is aware of that request.
Okay, thank you. With no further commissioner questions, let us move on to the public portion. The public is now invited to comment on this item. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak on this item. And Ms. Chan, if you would moderate this section.
Thank you, Chair. Let me read the disclosure. If you wish to speak and you're using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand button. If you are streaming the meeting through Zoom on your computer or dialing in via phone, please mute yourself so that there is no feedback sound during the meeting. If there is disruptive feedback or excessive noise during the meeting, your audio will be disabled. Chair, at this time, we have 2 attendees and nobody has raised their hand.
Okay, I see that too. Okay, it looks like they're just listening in. I'll just wait a minute longer just to see if they wanted to raise their hands. All right. I will go ahead and close the public comment period for this item and move on to commissioner discussion. Commissioner Mendel, I see your hand up first.
Yeah, I wanted to impose whatever parking requirements were reasonable. I will emphasize that discretion. At the time, the form-based codes was passed without a minimum parking requirement. Now, I've had some conversations with staff this week, and what I've learned is that the state law that was referenced in the staff report that was passed in the last couple of years basically eliminates the city's discretion to impose additional parking. It eliminates our discretion. And the only way that we can now impose additional parking is if our code includes a formula. Our code does not. So we are a little bit posed tonight in terms of our ability to impose additional parking requirements for this development, as I understand it. I have more comments, but I want to pause there and give staff a chance to correct me if I misspoke in any way.
No, that is my understanding of state law. Leah.
Yeah, the the way you described the form-based code is correct. There's no parking requirements, and it was adopted as such.
Yeah, and so I think that separate and apart from our action tonight, I think that we may want to encourage the City Council, which is our policy-making body, to review that lack of a minimum parking requirement and consider perhaps putting that back into the code so that for future developments, the city will again have some discretion to reject projects that are ridiculously underparked. So I may try to make that part of the motion as a recommendation to council, but obviously it doesn't really have bearing on tonight's vote. I mention all that because this development is woefully underparked. It's ridiculous how little parking there is. These are 18 two-bedroom apartments, which are likely to have, on average, 2 adults, maybe more, in each apartment. And 2 adults usually, though not always, as Elizabeth pointed out, usually means 2 cars. And so you're talking, 36 cars, round that down to 30 if there's a few folks with, just one car. So it still means you need 30 parking spaces to be in the realm of reasonable, as I see it, my opinion. Plus, you'd need some guest parking. Now, if this neighborhood had a ton of street parking and there was, plentiful street parking and the overflow could go there and we could just say, hey, no big deal, then maybe we could live with it being underparked. But that is not the case. And I suspect Commissioner Bonilla is going to have some details about that. I imagine, since you've lived there, you know how woefully underparked it is. And so we're basically adding to the problem with the parking tonight. I'm really not happy about that. And I would really like to vote against this project because of that. But I cannot, because my hands are tied, because we cannot use a minimum insufficient parking as justification to vote against it. This is, again, my understanding from talking with staff at some length prior to this meeting. I will say that aside from the lack of parking, it's a fine development. I think it's nice. I like the 2 bedrooms, the condos are fine. It looks okay. The density's fine. I think it fits in with the neighborhood, at least from my perspective, and our desire to make things a little bit more dense over time. But there's not enough parking. And I'm going to beg my fellow commissioners to include some language in the motion to encourage the city council to revisit the form-based code and reinsert a minimum parking standard of some kind so that in future developments, our hands will not be quite so tied. And thank you, Chair. I look forward to hearing what others have to add.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Goldstein.
Well, I'm a little surprised that I got picked next, but I guess I clicked faster than.
Well, yeah, there were no hands up. And I'll finish. All of a sudden, there were a lot of hands up. So
next time I'll have to warn you, I'm reaching for that button. Yeah, I go along with Al, but I have some mixed feelings here. So we really do, I think, for a lot of different reasons, want to incent home buyers to ditch the cars. We really do want to incent that. And there are some good reasons with this property that potential home buyers may be looking at this and saying, I could switch from a car to a bus, or maybe they're already doing that. So this is a step up for them in terms of a property, but maybe not much different than what we're doing by way of transportation today. But I just got to tell you, I had kind of the sinking feeling that that's probably not going to be the case. Look, people on my street, every person over the age of 18, and maybe 1 or 2 just making the age of 18, has their own car. And some of us also have a motorcycle and a bicycle. And there's a lot of great reasons why to ride the bicycle, and a lot of great reasons why to ditch the car and take the motorcycle downtown, because it eases up some parking. But our behavior just doesn't follow that way. Everybody gets in a car and they drive. It's just too damn convenient. The issue with that particular neighborhood, as Al and Ray have observed, is it's way oversubscribed. The number of cars and the number of residents, there's not a good match there. And there might be some alternative plans. Maybe rather than building more parking spaces, maybe there's some cooperative agreements you can do with the local businesses there to have them provide the parking and have them provide a fee-based parking strategy. Because at least that then, unbundling the parking is what we call it. At least then, if people have also to consider that there's a fee involved, maybe they'll really start seriously to consider that it could be better for them and better for the neighborhood and better for the planet to ditch the cars. We have to do something. So on the one hand, I admire that you're making some steps. Whether that was your intent or not is immaterial in my view. It's happening. And so for that, I like that. But like I say, I have that sinking feeling that parking is just going to be a nightmare if it's not addressed somehow with the neighboring businesses. That's my feeling. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bonilla.
Thank you. So I share the concerns around the parking as well, living on that street, and to Commissioner Goldstein's point around, working with the businesses in the area to see how you might be able to partner with parking. The businesses on the street are like 2 auto shops, and they park the cars in the auto shop on the street too. So you have that problem. You have high density, apartments at the end of the street. There's one way in, one way out. Your driveway is constantly being blocked. So I just don't really understand the feasibility of 18 parking stalls and no guest parking, because we know that all of that's going to end up draining onto the street. And the idea of, I think theoretically the idea of, or even conceptually, the idea of, complete communities, carless futures, it's great, but we're not there yet. And this community, this street in particular, and the city probably has information on it, isn't necessarily the safest community. There's fights on that street all the time. People are getting shot down that street all the time. There's a ton of car break-ins and house burglaries on that street. So I loved the pictures, Elizabeth, and I wish that that's the way it looks when we drive by there, but it's a much different community. And, I was listening to some students at Tennyson High School talk today about their concerns around gentrification and how the developments that we're approving continue to make things unaffordable for them and for their families. So now we have 16-year-olds working 2 jobs to try to pay rent in this city, when instead they should be focusing on going to high school. And I feel like some of these decisions that we're making, if we're not going to double down on our commitment to make sure that we're building affordably and we're not further, displacing our own community, is something that I feel like this project is going to do. I don't know how long those people have lived there. I'm not sure what those details are, but the idea of someone needing to redevelop and now you're getting evicted to do that. And for, Christina, I'm just wondering how does all of this even work with the ordinance? And should, this project be revisited in light of ensuring that it's meeting those requirements that, Zachariah so eloquently spoke about?
Yeah, so it's meeting the requirements of the affordable housing ordinance. And in terms of the rent stabilization ordinance, if the tenants voluntarily leave, then it meets the requirements of the rent stabilization ordinance. If the developer has to evict the tenants, then they would have to go through the just cause provisions of the ordinance and likely use an Ellis Act eviction to remove the units from the rental housing market. So then they would have to comply with that, which is actually state law.
So is there any type of way that these folks could, we could have some kind of assurance that they're going to be made aware of all of the different rights that they have? Because, I've known landlords or developers who've been pretty aggressive trying to get people out. And I think we see that in other parts of our community, maybe not in Hayward, but the region. So how do we make sure that these tenants who are going to be forced into this situation have a clear understanding of what all their rights are?
So I might defer to the city attorney's office if there's any way to, require notification of our residential rent stabilization ordinance as part of the development process. And then another thought I had is if we could require that the project allow the tenants to have right of first refusal to the units. So if that would be an option, but I'd have to defer to the city attorney's office.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with the noticing requirements of the Ellis Act and under our own ordinance that, we thought those apartments were vacant. So we didn't look into that before this meeting. That is something we can look into, whether, an approval here would relieve the applicant of any requirements under state law or our ordinance. I mean, the answer to that is no. They would still have to comply with those, ordinance and statutes. Could we require a noticing as a condition of approval? I think that's probably a fair condition. And I'm sorry, what was the other proposed condition?
right of first refusal to the tenants that were displaced. So they would have the first option to purchase those units.
I think that would be permissible. You might want to hear what the applicant has to say. That might already be part of their plan. I'd recommend that.
Did you want to pipe in about that, Basil?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it is part of our, especially some of the tenants have already expressed that, and right of first refusal is part of our plan. And by the way, I just wanted to also comment that the Ellis Act requires 4 months. I was just looking it up while here, whereas our plan is 6 months notice. So just wanted to note.
So Christina, for around the requirement of noticing, would it also be inclusive of their rights and their protections?
Noticing of their, so as the requirements for noticing under our ordinances is that a tenant be made aware of their rights at time of signing a lease or at the time of enactment of the ordinance, because some of our ordinances are new. So at the time it was enacted, the property owner did have to notify the tenants. Whether or not they complied with that, we don't know until there is a problem. But in terms of requiring that they notice now, I don't think that there wouldn't be any kind of violation of the ordinance to have them notify them an additional time about their rights under these various ordinances.
Got it. So I would be open once there's a motion on the table to looking at just adding those two as conditions of approval as well, just to really get them locked in, because I appreciate the plan that's in place and everything like that, but we got a staff report that said no one even lived here. So I'm just kind of questioning now the integrity of a lot of things. So the more that we can actually get in writing and make sure that we have full commitments around, I think I would be much more comfortable with. So thank you very much. Those are my comments for this evening.
I just wanted to say that I am sorry we have overlooked that fact. It should not have said vacant, and that was a mistake from our side. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
Was
Thank
not
you.
done on purpose. It was not done on purpose. Just wanted to again clarify that.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Appreciate all the comments that my fellow commissioners have made so far. I guess I'll start just for Mr. Yaqub. The development looks very nice. The images, the conception that we've been presented with today, it looks like a great development. And generally speaking, I'm supportive of positive investment in the city of Hayward and development that's going to provide adaptable reuse to vacant or underutilized land. Again, on its basis, I'm very supportive of that type of work. Two big concerns here, though. The first is parking. And I guarantee you parking is going to be a significant issue. You're not going to have to deal with it because you're selling it, and it's going to be up to the HOA to deal with that once they moved in. I personally have interesting thoughts on parking. We've discussed it in previous calls, meetings here. There's, I have the aspirational and theoretical thoughts as it relates to parking and moving us forward and where we should be as a society. And then there's the pragmatic reality. There's one person in my household. I have 3 cars. I like cars. I'm not driving them all the time, but I like cars, right? There are a lot of people that just like cars. And so by only providing one spot per unit, again, I understand the requirements, by only providing one spot per unit, on top of the fact that they are compact spots. So if you see on the plan, multiple spots on there are actually compact spots. And so the ingress and egress is going to be a nightmare in there. It's going to create a significant problem. And unfortunately, it is not in conflict with the general plan. And so it's not a compelling enough reason to not move this forward in and of itself. The second concern I have is really around this tenancy issue. And clearly based on discussion that it's opened up, I'm glad that I raised this because it's very disconcerting to me. And it could have been an oversight, but if I think about this logically, either it wasn't leased out like the city was told, which would have been great for you, and then you went and leased it to people in the interim, which significantly complicates your process forward for development, or it was always leased out. There were people that were already living there, and for some reason or another, the city was not told of that. And so that to me is, it's very concerning. Again, at the end of the day, that's, between the developer and the residents. The market is going to sort that out. At a certain price, there will be a clearing point where the residents are willing to accept and likely vacate. I don't know what that number is going to be, but again, the market will determine it. But generally speaking, that the way that this was handled is a little concerning to me.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you. So I guess from my perspective, I'm very supportive of the project. I love the architecture. I love the design. I recognize it's a complex site to develop on. I think the yield is good. Labor and materials prices and land prices aren't going down. So that means that if we want to encourage development, developers have to take risk, and they have to have knowledge of what the risks they are potentially encountering. And we know that in order to encourage development, we need to make sure it's very, very clear to everybody what their potential risks are. So I like the project as it is. It seems to me the state and the city have requirements related to evicting tenants that might be residing there. I am assuming that we in the city follows those rules. So I guess I don't really understand the challenge there. I guess finally, I don't understand the parking concern. I mean, why could this project not integrate a parking stacker? If we were really that concerned about on-site stalls, why could the development not be required to add a few parking stackers to multiply one stall to two? It's very, very common in Berkeley and Oakland to have that requirement. I don't know how you would enforce that in the future, but I guess that would be just a question for me. But I'm completely supportive of the project as it's been designed and as it's been presented.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Did you want the staff to talk to that, Commissioner Stevens, about the stacking?
Yeah, I mean, if the question is if we're concerned that one unit is going to have multiple vehicles, it seems that the association or the property owner would either need to solve that challenge by securing parking offsite or by providing and installing a stacker in the existing site.
I'll jump in here on this one. So the key provision here is that you can't require it because there's no parking requirement. So you can't add it as a condition. However, the applicant could add it, or in the future, if the HOA has an issue, they could come back and apply to put in stackers. It would be something they would have to pay for if it was valuable enough to the people that lived there to add that parking. And it would have to come in and go through the permitting process. So there's no, it's not that they can't do it. It's just that one, it's not required. So this body can't say that they're not in compliance and impose it on the developer, but the developer could add it, or the HOA could add it at a later date.
I guess I understand that. I guess what the question is what's the enforcement action if there was a challenge in the neighborhood? If this development caused a nuisance in the neighborhood, is there any enforcement action the city could then make at that point? None.
There's street parking, there's not a nuisance related to that unless you're double parking or closing off fire lanes. Joe, do you want to speak to this? I don't think.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of echo those statements. It's not really a nuisance issue unless people are blocking driveways or something like that, or fire hydrants, in which case city code enforcement would go out, and perhaps law enforcement as well.
So then I guess I would switch my what I stated, that I would encourage the developer to consider a stacker to help make it more palatable or something to that effect.
Thank you. Commissioner Kenda.
Thanks. I guess I'll just start saying here, I am also concerned about all the parking issues. I'm not going to reiterate them. I share parking concerns, but I'm also someone who is a single car household. I don't own a car. I ride my bicycle and use public transit. So I'm also in the market for condos. And so, like, to be fully candid, my wife and I were just priced out of the market for condos that are just like this. I'm sure I have a law degree and my wife has a PhD, and we probably won't be able to afford what you're building. And that's just the reality. And I kind of don't accept that, frankly. That's just my, that just seems to me there's something very wrong here. And I think that I wanted to just name that. That doesn't, that bears as like a general concern of some of the limitations that we're facing as a body, but there are things that are within our control. I just right now, given a lot of questions I have about the tenants' actual knowledge of their rights in this context, like I want them to have full understanding that they actually, like they have a process that they can hold to, and there's no reason for them to give that time up. Time is money. Time is also more valuable. If these people really enjoy living there and they want to stay, there might be other things that they want other than money or other compensation. Another 6 months might be it. I don't know if there's anybody elderly or disabled living there. Like, the notice gets to 12 months. So I'm just like, these are questions I don't have because this wasn't addressed. So I think on that grounds, frankly, I can't support the project. I would not be voting in favor of this project. And I fully understand SB 330's implications, but I think the lack of information about the tenant situation and the vacancy issue, I think, is enough reason to not move forward on this. It gives good justification at the very least to have you all kind of do more groundwork, applicants, to get us that information and the demographic and like other issues that we're talking about. I wanted to second something that Commissioner Bonilla talked about just this afternoon. We attended a meeting, and Chair Roche, we attended a meeting where students at Tennyson High School presented on issues that they are seeing in their family, their communities, in the years they lived here, and the pressures that they're feeling. And this is a textbook example of gentrification, pure and simple. It just is. It is going to, have like, it does have an impact on people. And, I can't speak for those people, and they very well may want to move, and there may be these kind of things, but I want that knowledge before I choose to support a project like this. And I do not feel satisfied. So I will not be supporting this project. And I hope commissioners will consider doing the same to get that information so that we can be sure we're making the right decision here, or at least a responsible, like, informed impact on the people that are going to be displaced. We have to know the trade-offs, and I don't know them right now. They're not clear to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Mendel, I see your hand up, but I'm going to go ahead and give my comments, assuming you might be wanting to make a motion. Yeah, I, of course, have the similar concerns about the parking as everybody else. And again, I won't rehash it. But I was wondering to the applicant, with all these questions about where the current residents are going to go, I know that the requirement for the affordable housing ordinance here was that it was 10%, so 1.8 units, which means 1 unit. But I'm wondering, would you consider making it 2 units? So you have 1 very low unit, 1 moderate unit, and perhaps that might help some of your right of first refusal renters, have more of an opportunity to stay in that neighborhood. Would you consider that at all, adding a second unit so that your 1.8 requirement would go, higher to 2 units because you are concerned about the current renters that are there?
I would defer that to Mr. Kareem.
Mr. Kareem, can you comment on that? Sorry, you're muted. Can you unmute?
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But maybe speak up or get closer because we can't hear you very well.
How about now?
Better.
Okay. Yeah, well, we already thought about it when we got some information from you regarding the affordable housing. and that's why we decided to, to give a unit that was, I think, more valuable than the other, because we thought the location of the unit have more value to it. And if this will give us a leverage of giving you one unit, and not to say that the other units are really low, but there was a price. We considered that as a big price difference. So that's what we did. And if we have to, the city council decide. I mean, if you want us to move, that you think there's another valuable unit there, then we will be able to move that. We will give the other unit instead.
Yeah, I mean, I just, if you're concerned about the current renters, and it sounds like you are, and trying to help them find location, that providing an opportunity for them to stay in that current location. And as you said, some of them are interested in staying in that location. So I mean, maybe back to you, Basil, like, is this something you're considering? Because I understand from architectural, that's a question, but it really is an intent of the owner to want to be a good neighbor and be a good community member to consider that option.
I'm sure. I think to tag on top of what Mr. Kareem was stating, yes, we would be, especially if it would help one of our current tenants to to achieve the American dream of home ownership. I think we would consider maybe to do a moderate income or something like that. Sure.
Okay, and if we did that, maybe this is to Joe. Can we just do that as an amendment?
So you're discussing changing the one very low income household to a requirement of two moderate?
No, to leave the one very low unit and add an additional moderate in a unit.
I mean, that would be done in condition of approval. Yeah, that could be done. And then I would, refer that question to Christina, who can talk about the affordable housing plan.
Christine, is that something, since the owner seems to be amenable to that, could we add that as an amendment?
Yes, I mean, if the owner wants to change the affordable housing plan to provide one very low income unit and one moderate income unit, we could definitely modify the plan to include that.
Thank you. Okay, and let's see. Yeah, I mean, I am concerned about the rental notification, but it does seem like there are plans in place to do that. And like, as Joe said, that there is state law that mandates this. But I did want to, just because I'm hearing some of the commissioners' concerns about this, is there, if we continue this just so that piece was developed so that everybody felt more comfortable about that, would that be appropriate, or is there not an option? I just don't know what the procedural steps would be to do that.
Procedurally, if there's a motion to continue this item to date certain, the next meeting or two meetings after, that's possible.
Okay. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that. I just wanted to ask what the options are there. Okay. With that, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in, I think, I did have one other thing. There's this, we haven't talked about this, but there is a huge housing complex right across the street. It goes sort of down like an aisle looking thing. And there are, I see that there's parking garages, but are those all occupied at this point, that big housing development across the street? Does maybe the owner, or does Elizabeth know that?
It's Sohay.
Oh, it's another like linear.
Yeah, it's a smaller development that's like directly across the street from this one.
A lot of units. I'm wondering how that's affecting things.
I'm not sure if it's occupied yet. If it has occupancy, I'm not sure the latest of that one. I didn't process that application.
I think partially, I think it might be, but they have a couple of ins and outs from the other side, not from Barry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know they look like they're 2-car garages, but it seems like once that's fully parked as well, or fully occupied, it's just going to saturate the neighborhood even more. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say at this point. Yeah. Okay.
I do have a comment if
Sure, go ahead.
I can say to just a comment to what Councilman Quenda was speaking about, that in terms of noticing the tenants and if they know of all of their rights. So whether we go through the Ellis Act or not, or whether we do a voluntary thing, I mean, we would be happy if just a condition of the approval becomes that, hey, you know, we have to notice them 6 months in advance and give them in writing and get, you know, have that recorded with the city, or give a copy. I believe there are some other cities that require that you give a copy of signed receipt from the tenant of letting them know of all of their laws and all of their rights at that point. And we would be happy to accommodate that as well, to make sure that the tenants know all of their rights up front. So just wanted to make that clear, that we're here to work in any way possible.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, with some of the amendments we've talked about tonight regarding notice for the tenants, regarding an additional unit, I'm inclined to support the staff's recommendations, because there is nothing we can do. We're definitely hamstrung by the parking, but I think we're saying this loud and clear to staff, and hopefully, you know, that will get to City Council, and maybe per Commissioner Mendel's comments that we make some notice to council on this about parking, because, you know, we keep being very frustrated about the parking and not wanting to impact the communities the way we are going to. So with that, I will entertain a motion. And I think Commissioner Mendel had his hand up first.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate you speaking first before we went around for a second time. So a question before I take a stab at a motion here. So there have been some objections raised, I know Commissioner Akenda in particular, but I didn't hear anything in there that were valid grounds to vote against the project. I did hear things in the, like valid, like legal grounds, and this, I guess, is a question to the city attorney. But I did hear concerns that could justify a continuance. Would you agree with that, or are there grounds for either choice?
I agree with your statement. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, no legal grounds to vote against this that I've heard raised yet, but we could continue it for more information. You know, my inclination is to move ahead. I which is weird, because I would vote against this project if I could, because there's not enough parking. But my job as the planning commissioner is not to do what I want to do. It is to follow the law and apply my judgment to it. And so if I'm following the law, I cannot see any justification for not approving this. But maybe we can make it a little bit better with a few amendments. And one last question is, could we require that the parking be unbundled from the units, effectively that the HOA would own the parking and lease them out separately to the tenants? That way, someone who doesn't have a car has a financial savings as a result of that, and someone with 2 cars might actually be able to get a second space. Is that something that we could require, unbundling the parking?
We as owners would be totally open to that if that's what satisfy the council, where we would be okay with that.
So thank you. The question was to staff, though.
Yeah, that would be fine, especially with the agreement of the applicant.
Okay, then let me take a stab at this, and I'm going to try and incorporate some of the suggestions that my fellow commissioners make. And it's going to include a few amendments here. And if there's a desire to break it up and have separate votes on any of these amendments, I hope people will just say so and we can break them out. I'm just going to include them all here because I think there might be consensus. So my motion is this: the staff recommendation with 3 amendments. The first is to add a condition that requires the tenants be notified of their rights, as described earlier, you know, about the evictions and all that. The second amendment is that this planning commission recommends that the city council consider adding minimum parking standards to all of the form-based code areas, period. All And I don't know, I will defer to staff as to how best to forward such a recommendation if people are comfortable with it. Maybe it's a letter from the chair. I don't know. Maybe staff can do it on their own. But to include that in the motion. And then the third change is to require that the parking be unbundled so that someone with no cars will see a financial savings by not having to lease the parking from the HOA. And someone with multiple cars could have a chance at parking those multiple cars. So if there's a second, I want to get clarification from staff that those three amendments make sense.
All right, do we have a second? Commissioner Bonilla, did you second?
Yeah, Commissioner Mendel, I'll be happy to second with two more amendments if you'd be willing. So first is that second affordable housing unit that Commissioner Roche got the applicant to agree to should be added as another condition of approval.
And so that would be one low and one moderate?
Yeah, I think there's one very low now. This would be a moderate income unit that they agreed to.
Moderate. Okay. Yes. Thank you. I'd forgotten that.
And then the next amendment would be to add right of first refusal for those currently living there, please.
Yes, I certainly accept those. Thank you for catching those.
Thank you. I'll second.
And so before I relinquish the floor, I just want to get staff, I want to make sure those 5 amendments are clear, that we can do them all from the dais without specific language. And if not, that we clean them up before we pass this off to everybody else to weigh in on. Leah?
I guess I'll say yes. I think that we've talked about all of these amendments separately, and I heard from Joe, and I personally think that they all sound like, since the applicant agreed to them, legal, and we can work on the language based on the intent stated in this meeting. The only one that I would have any pause about is we can't add a condition of approval that the city council update the parking regulations to this particular project, but we can certainly through minutes inform.
So I'm not, so what the intent of that was just to use this as a vehicle to provide consensus that we send a recommendation separate from this to the council saying, hey, by the way, please don't let this happen again. Look at the form-based code parking requirement. Now, if you'd like, I can remove that and we can have a separate vote on that after this, but I don't know if that's legally allowed.
I think with that one requirement, having that not be part of this motion would make sense. And then if the chair can just ask if there's a consensus, if there's any objections to referring this to council, then staff can go and see if we can get that on the agenda. And if they want to have a work session, a joint work session or something like that, that's how we've traditionally handled it in the past. And I think that would make a lot of sense.
All right.
Sorry, Mendel, if you want to pause and we can vote on that one piece and sort that out and move that on, because my understanding is individual amendments need to be voted on before we go to the main motion. Is that right, Joe?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner Mendel.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but I think what I heard staff saying is that amendment cannot be included in the motion, but that it could be something that we do separately somehow. It wasn't quite clear how that would happen. So let's do this. I'm going to withdraw that one amendment about the recommendation to council. So we're left with 4 amendments. Did I freeze?
No, it was my kids came in and I was talking to them and I was on.
So we're left with 4 amendments: unbundling the parking, notification to the tenants, the +1 moderate affordable unit, and the right of first refusal. Staff recommendation plus those 4. That was the motion. Seconder. We're on the same page. Cool.
Yep. Would the maker consider at least a 6-month requirement for that noticing? Sorry, that's what we talked about.
Yeah.
At least 6 months.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
And thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your patience.
Can I ask a question about the unbundling?
Sorry. Yep, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead, Commissioner? Because we can have discussion now. We have our first, we have our second. Let's start discussion. And Commissioner Goldstein, go ahead.
Yeah, good, very good. So my concern with the unbundling, if we don't put in some additional requirement with it, the HOA might decide on its own to just, like hand out hall passes for free. And so the concept of unbundling, for it to actually work as an incentive for people not to have cars, has to come with a cost. So how do we put that in this amendment? Do we talk about some kind of a standard of market rate and what that might be for a parking space, or we just tell them that it's got to be a minimum of $200 a month and 10% per year cost of living increase? I don't know. How do we deal with that?
I think that the problem with that is they would be paying themselves. So if you set it at a rate for, an unbundled parking spot of $200, they're paying the HOA, which is essentially the 18 residents who live there. So I don't know how you would get around that. It seems like that would just be, you could rely on the market and just not specify anything, but we would have to give that some thought to see if there's a way in which to monetize that. And that might be something that's just better left to, the HOA.
All right. So I'm just saying that we need to put some kind of language in there so they don't just treat it like a freebie that they just dole out. If they do it that way, then there's no incentive the way that we mean it to be.
Typically, unbundling would look something like at the sale of the unit, you purchase a unit and a parking space. And so that's how it typically is handled. The HOA would be in charge of enforcing what was happening on those. I think that the owners could do something like market it, and you could market the unit as a no parking space unit or a unit with a parking space. And that's when you're talking about unbundling or bundling parking and units, that's typically how it's done.
See, so in my thoughts, it seems like it might be more effective as a separate rental. So none of the units come with parking. And if you want parking, you got to pay the HOA for a rental of the space.
I think that if you just sort of leave it, this should be unbundled, and then the owners can look into what best practices are related to this. I think that might be better than locking them into a model that might not work.
Okay, well, I'll wait and hear what my fellow commissioners have to say about that.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Ali Sullivan, discussion on the motion.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I was supportive of this motion until this requirement for the additional low-income unit was put into it. So I have a real issue with that, and I'd like to request that the maker of the motion separate that out and have a separate vote on that piece. The reason I have a concern about that is around equity, and the whole issue that we're trying to address here is equity for the people that potentially live there. However, while the applicant has theoretically volunteered to do this, we're basically forcing them to do it in order to get this project through, going above and beyond what's required by the city. And that hasn't necessarily been equitably applied to all applicants who have come to the city for projects. And so why should these two applicants be forced to have 1/18 of their project, or actually 1/17 of their project now added as low income, when that same type of requirement based on discussion from a commission meeting hasn't been applied to other projects? The second concern I have with it is, I think the assumption is that unit would go to someone who lives there. I could be incorrect here. However, I believe the way that the low-income housing works is that there's some type of a pool or a list of sorts, and there's no guarantee that unit is going to go to anyone who lives there currently right now. And so if the idea is to provide one of these units for someone to live there by adding a second low-income housing unit in this project, I'm not sure if we're achieving that goal. Even if we are, I still don't support it because, again, the question of equity and how it's being applied to this application. So my request would be to the maker of the motion to remove that as one of the stipulations of the motion.
The maker of the motion, would you like to address that?
So I'm happy to have it stand for a separate vote. I don't want to withdraw the amendment.
Okay.
But I think separate vote is appropriate since we're not all on the same page with that.
Okay. All right, so Joe, I guess if I do this, should we?
No, as the seconder of the motion, I probably should.
I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner
Okay.
Bonilla.
And I don't necessarily agree with Commissioner Ali Sullivan. We asked the applicant, are they willing to do this? And they said yes. We didn't say you have to. We didn't say that if you don't do this, that this isn't a quid pro quo thing. She asked very clearly, is the applicant willing to add another unit? And the applicant said yes. So I'm not sure where the conflict is there. So I don't want to unbundle it. And in fact, if there's not an additional affordable unit, I do want to discuss other things that we could potentially, bring up to make sure that we have equity in this community, not just with the developer, but within the community, that we're clearly going to go in and gingify by making this decision. So I would not accept the unbundle. So if that means I would need to withdraw my second, Commissioner Mendel, then I'll do that.
Joe, does that mean we go forward, we continue discussion on this motion and then we vote on it? And if it dies, then we can split things off and do something different?
Right, so you can continue the discussion on the motion. And if you want to split, there was a request to split that amendment off of this motion. So if there's a second, unless there's a consensus, and you can just vote on that separately. If we have to go through the process, then if there's a second for the split for a separate vote, which does not mean that you're necessarily supportive of it, it's just that you want to separate it out and have a separate vote on it. Then you'll call that vote. We'll determine if there's enough support on the council to have a separate vote. At that point, we would vote on the amendment first, and then the remainder of the motion.
Okay, but then what do I do right now since the maker of the motion agreed to...
I'm sorry, Chair.
Wait, sorry, Commissioner. If the maker of the motion has agreed to split off, but the seconder has not agreed to that, what do I do with that?
Okay, is there anyone who you would just ask if there's anyone to second the motion to have a separate vote on that amendment? If there is, you can take a vote.
I see. Okay, because one commissioner is allowed to peel something off and do it. Okay, so, all right, so let's continue discussion before we make the vote, and then we'll deal with peeling off the motion. Is that reasonable?
Can I just clarify?
Let me just ask Commissioner. Hold on, Commissioner. Commissioner,
Sure.
all right, sorry, Joe. So is it reasonable to continue the discussion on the current motion and then we talk about the motion to peel off, or would it be better that we deal with that first?
The motion to peel it off would take precedence over the current motion.
Okay, great. So do we have a second to peel off the motion and vote for it separately?
Just to be clear, Commissioner Ali Sullivan, you're making a motion to divide the question essentially for the amendments. In this particular amendment, I would like to add that we have, because there's been other issues with the parking, I would just add that we divide the question on all four amendment parts.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Look, this is what happens when we start to add stuff onto it.
No. I agree with you. I just want to make sure I'm dealing with the pieces that I'm supposed to deal with. So let's start this first. Ali Sullivan has made a motion to peel off the affordable unit amendment. Do we have a second to peel that off and have a separate vote on it?
Chair, I might be willing to second that.
Okay.
But I'd like to...
Excuse me. No, Commissioner Stevens, please finish. But Joe, I have a question.
All right, go ahead.
About procedure. But Commissioner Stevens, please finish. I'm sorry.
So I apologize, but I'd like to ask Mr. Ali Sullivan to briefly state his reason again, just so I can hear it one more time.
Yeah, the reason I'm requesting that it be taken off is because I'm not supportive of the amendment as it stands. The reason I'm not supportive of it is because the applicant has already met the requirements for low-income housing that's required by the city. And this has been brought up as ostensibly, we have forced their hand on this. And Commissioner Bonilla, I know you might see it differently. And if that's the case, let's have a separate vote on the two of them. If the applicants are willing to provide 8 low-income houses, that's fine. However, they're only required to provide 1. And I do not support forcing them as part of a vote contingent on the overall approval of the project, to add in a requirement above what's required, so an extra unit, when we don't do that on a consistent basis. There have been other housing projects where, based on the discussion, it hasn't led to a question of will you add more public housing and have a vote on it. It's a question of equity, right? There's a requirement that they have to meet. Same as with the parking, they met the requirement. We might not agree with it, but they met the requirement. And so I don't believe that it should be part of the original motion. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I second that, Chair.
Okay, so we're going to peel that off the main motion. We have a motion on the table to peel off the additional unit amendment. We have a second. So let's have discussion then on this part of it, this amendment or this motion.
Chair?
Is that right, Joe? Go ahead.
There's no discussion on the vote. So
Okay.
you just take a vote right now.
Okay, but are we taking a vote to peel it off?
To peel it off, right?
Okay, just to peel it off. Okay.
So how does Zachariah's comment play into this, where he wants to do it with
just
all
says on pause. Don't. Yeah, we're on that one motion, so we can discuss that.
So I guess all we're doing right now, Secretary Chan, is we're just taking a vote on whether to peel this off the main motion. We're starting with that. So if you could take a roll call vote on.
Hang on. 1 second. Let's pause for a second, okay? I'm listening to the discussion. It's getting very confusing over on my side. I don't know how it is on your side. It's getting confusing over here. All right. So to be clear, Commissioner Mendel made a motion. And on top of that, he added 2 amendments. He actually added 3. And one of them had to be removed, which was the moderate income unit, correct? Am I following so far?
Denise?
Yeah.
So currently the only motion that's pending that we're voting on right now is a motion to have a separate vote on the condition to add a moderate unit. And then we'll get back to the main vote, depending on how that goes.
Oh, sorry. Where the motion is to have a separate vote. Is that the motion?
Yes, the motion's to have a separate vote on adding a condition of approval to require an additional moderate income unit.
Right, and I just want to be clear too, we're not voting on whether or not we want this unit. We're just voting on whether we want to peel it off.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, hang on a sec. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bonilla.
No.
Commissioner Goldstein.
No,
That is a no.
that is correct. I said no.
Thank you. Commissioner Mendel.
Yes.
Commissioner Okenda.
No.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Stevens said yes, correct? Yes.
Correct.
Did you second that motion? Correct?
Correct.
All right. Chair Roche.
No.
All right, so there are 3 ayes and 4 noes.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. So that means it does not get peeled off and it remains in the motion, correct, Joe?
Correct.
Okay, so let's move forward with discussion on the main motion that remains intact the way Commissioner Mendel said it with Commissioner Bonilla's additions and seconding. So let me go down now. I see Commissioner Okenda. Let's continue discussion on the motion.
So I will not refer to what I said before. I'm just going to strike that, and I'm going to say this. I think it would bring me a great deal of relief in this vote on this particular issue if we had some similar, maybe it's a side referral aside from the motion or not. This is kind of also a procedural question to ensure that there is a plan that's in writing that is given to the city council in review. I'm assuming, we've made mention this is going to city council. Is that right? That there's a plan. Okay. So I've heard people say that a few times and that's confused me. So like, I guess I will not change. I will not add a motion. I don't know what else to say. I just, disagree with not having a displacement relocation plan sort of spelled out. I just don't feel comfortable supporting the motion.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Kenda. Commissioner Stevens, did you want to add to the discussion?
Are you seeking clarification on how the first right of refusal functions and how it operates?
Does staff want to, or maybe Christina, does someone want to address that?
Could you repeat the question?
So there was an amendment made that the tenants that occupy the space would have the first right of refusal. And I assume that means that they would have the opportunity to purchase one of the properties. But I just would like some clarification. I don't understand what first right of refusal means.
Yes, the first right of refusal would give them the option to purchase one of the properties. There was a comment made by one of the commissioners that indicated whether they'd have first right of refusal to the affordable units because there is a marketing requirement. So I would have to verify that component of it, but there is a Hayward tenant and employee preference under the affordable housing ordinance. But for those affordable units, I would have to verify that we could allow them to have that first right of refusal for the affordable units.
So it's for the affordable units. It's not for the other 17 or 16 units.
Well, that wasn't my amendment. My amendment was simply the addition. So I was not trying to bundle those, Commissioner Stevens, if that helps.
Got it. Thank you.
The first right of refusal to me is separate from adding an additional moderate unit.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Commissioner Mendel, did you want to add to the discussion at this point?
No, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Yeah, a couple of questions here. For the city attorney, can you explain how the low-income housing process works in the city of Hayward? Is there a current list? Is there an application process? How are low-income houses allocated?
I think I would have to defer to Christina, the expert, on how that whole process is implemented.
In its simplest form.
Yeah, so each of the projects have to market their affordable units separately. Most of them will establish a lottery, and that would establish the order by which people can apply for the units. They have to sort that list by the preferences, which would be whether somebody either lives or works in the city of Hayward. So those individuals would have the first option to purchase the units.
Okay, so there's no process whereby if I'm building a building on a lot with someone already living there, that I can give them preferential access to a low-income unit?
I would have to evaluate that probably with the city attorney's office to make sure that we weren't, by allowing the first right of refusal on a unit that we intended to be marketed broadly to city residents, that we wouldn't somehow be violating our own ordinance.
Chair Roche, when you made the request, were you making that motion on the assumption that one of those additional units would be going to someone who already lives on the property?
No, I was in general asking for them to provide more affordable housing because we have a huge need for it in the city. So, I mean, it would just create more options for those tenants, but I was not intending to bundle the first right of refusal with an additional unit. So I'm not trying to require that.
To the applicant, did you accept the offer of an additional low-income unit on the assumption that it would go to someone who currently lives on the property?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, did you accept the request for a second low-income unit be added to the project on the assumption that one of those or that additional unit would go to someone who currently lives on the property?
No, we're okay with the general public being offered a second unit.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonilla, did you want to add to the discussion before we call a vote?
The one thing that I just wanted to add, Chair Roche, is how brilliant you were to ask for the second unit. You know, our arena numbers in the city are low across all of our we have work to do in the city around affordable housing. And what you just demonstrated by asking this applicant if he was willing to do that, and this applicant's willingness to do that, just makes me elated to be supporting this application. I appreciate the applicant. I appreciate your commitment. I appreciate the work that you're doing to, you know, ensure that your current tenants have up to 6 months of noticing, all of the work that you're doing to help them relocate, this first right of refusal. I think that if more developers practice the corporate citizenship and the goodwill that you do, the city would be a better place as we continue to develop. So Chair Roche, bravo. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonilla. I appreciate those comments. And I agree with you. I mean, I'm very pleased with the motion, with the things that we've added. I was very pleased that the owner was willing to add a moderate unit. It definitely made me sort of like jump on board to know that you're that committed to the community. So I am supportive of the motion. And with that, Joe, did you want to add something before I call a vote?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clarify the language for the first right of refusal and just make sure that what I'm thinking is consistent with what everyone, all the commissioners are thinking right now. Would it be the first right of refusal for the current tenants on all market rate parcels or all market rate units and the affordable units to the extent legally possible?
Please, yes.
Okay.
Very nicely said.
Yeah, everyone's nodding yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it looks like we have a yes from the motioner and the seconder. Okay, with that, I will ask Denise Chan to call a roll call vote on the motion made by Commissioner Mendel, seconded by Commissioner Bonilla, with the motion to move staff recommendations with 4 amendments. One that adds a condition that tenants be notified of their rights with a 6-month period, that we're requiring that an amendment that required that the parking be unbundled. Third, that a second additional moderate income unit will be added to the conditions of approval. And fourth, that there is a right of first refusal of per Joe's language that he just mentioned. So can we call, Commissioner Sullivan, did you want to add something really quick before we call a vote?
I do, yeah. Just for the record, based on the comments that were made, I'd like the minutes to reflect that for clarity, I was not opposed to low-income units being added to the project. I also think it's commendable. I was opposed to any inequitable treatment of applicants to the Planning Commission as it relates to units being required on development. Based on the conversation and based on what the applicant said, that it was not related to anyone who currently lives on site and they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, then I think it's great that they're going to add a second unit. And so I'm supportive of the motion.
Thank you. All right, with that, Secretary Chan, can we please call a roll call vote?
Sorry, I just have one more comment. I'm sorry to do that. I know we want to get out of here.
Go ahead and then
move on. I just wanted to quickly respond there. I think this is a question, just for the record, that we ask every applicant. Can you do more on affordable housing? I think it comes up every meeting where we get housing projects. So I don't think there's any question of equity here with that question or that concern. And because the applicant was willing to do that, there was no additional tension or any issue. And I finally did want to just say I will be voting no on this. And my reason for that is I just do not feel there was enough consideration to an actual written plan, having all the facts for the displacement and what the tenants are going to be given. It's left up too much, and given, and I do sincerely mean no disrespect to the applicants at all. It's just pure for me, for procedure, for process, and for protection of tenants' rights, that this be done a certain way and that it be transparent and accountable in a certain way. And so I want to echo my fellow commissioners in saying that, like, I commend you for what appears, in this meeting from, the exposure I have, that you're committed to supporting tenants in different ways. But I do not feel that in this process there's been enough transparency about that and enough disclosure for me to feel comfortable to support it. And I just, without that more information, I can't be certain that I'm not doing more harm by contributing to a vote in approval of this project by displacing people who are renters. We're valuing people who are going to be buying these condos over renters that currently live here. And that to me is, without more information, I don't feel is a decision that I feel comfortable making. So I will not be supporting the motion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Kenda, for those words. Secretary Chan, please call the roll call vote.
Thank you. I just want to ask Joe, City Attorney.
Yes.
You will provide me the language for the.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. All right, here we go. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Yes.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Yes.
Commissioner Mendel.
Yes.
Commissioner Okenda.
No.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
Chair Roche.
Yes.
Thank you. 6 ayes, 1 no.
Thank you, Secretary Chan. So the motion carries by 6-1, and the motion is approved. Thank you, everybody, for that intense discussion. I think we're all better for it, I hope. And let us move on to our next agenda item, which is approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Commissioner Bonilla, did you say you moved that? Okay. Do I have a second to approve the minutes?
I'll second.
Wait, who was that? Was that
Robert?
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. All right, Secretary Chan, we have a motion to approve the minutes by Commissioner Bonilla and a second by Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Yes.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Yes.
Commissioner Mendel.
Yes.
Commissioner Okenda.
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
Chair Roche.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that the motion carries for the approval of the minutes. Okay, we're almost done, I think. Do we have reports from staff? Leah, do you have anything for us this evening? No. Okay. I saw you were shaking your head, but I didn't hear you for a minute there. Okay, commissioner announcements. Let's see, do we have Commissioner Goldstein? Did you want to make an announcement for?
Yeah, just very briefly, just wanted to say hats off to any volunteers in the audience, veterans in the audience. Veterans Day is coming up, so please take a moment over the weekend and on Veterans Day to consider what others have lost so that we may gain. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonilla.
Thank you. I'll be brief in my announcements, but I did want to underscore the experience that I had today with the students at Tennyson High School that I think directly relate to some of the work that we do on the Planning Commission. So this afternoon, I had the pleasure of hearing from about Zachariah and Commissioner Roche did as well, Commissioner Okenda and Chair Roche. We had the privilege of hearing from about 15 students at the Tennyson High School, which is my alma mater, and they were talking about how gentrification in Hayward is impacting them and their families and their friends. So quick context about Tennyson High School. It's in South Hayward. It's a very diverse student population with over 97% of the students being minorities and over 70% of them being Hispanic. Over 75% of the students that attend that high school are considered economically disadvantaged and live in poverty. The 15 students that spoke with us today discussed how new luxury apartments and developments in South Hayward are driving up rents, making things more expensive, and making life harder for the community. They're experiencing the effects of gentrification firsthand. Many of these students are working multiple jobs while also trying to support their high school education and help their parents with bills and rent. these students did have a call to action. They asked for better policy in this city and better policy related to decisions to preserve and increase affordable housing. They asked for increases to minimum wage, and they asked for more protections against evictions and policies against rising rents. They're scared that without these changes, they'll be pushed out of a city that they call home. And I think that, that was really weighing on my mind a lot throughout tonight's entire set of discussions. The next quick announcement that I wanted to make is something related to COVID, which is Communivax. It's a national coalition that strengthens the community's role in equity of COVID-19 vaccines and also general health equity beyond COVID. It's an effort that's being led through Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Earlier this year, Communivax released a report to public officials, city managers, mayors, council members, you as appointed officials throughout this country. And the report was titled Equity in Vaccination, a plan to work with communities of color towards COVID-19 recovery and beyond. What I wanted to announce tonight is that the group is pleased that we've released our companion toolkit to this report. It's the implementation toolkit. This toolkit provides clear directives and call to actions for local governments and community partners in launching equity and recovery efforts, especially with a lot of the federal funding that's now reaching and making its way to local communities. I won't say too much more about this toolkit, but I really do encourage everyone listening that's in a position to, drive equity and health equity to take a look at the toolkit. It really outlines some great actions that can be taken, partners to involve how and where to seek funding. It's a treasure trove of information. So check it out on the communivax.org website under the resource section, and Communivax is spelled COMMUNIVAX.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonilla. Commissioner Mendel.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to circle back to the item that staff, the Fifth Amendment that staff suggested could not be part of that motion. And I wanted to make sure there was consensus on a way to make that recommendation to council to review the minimum parking standards for the form-based code area. And I mean, can we do, just this question to staff, can we do this with, a set of nods, or how procedurally, how might we accomplish that? Since I heard at least 5 or 6 members of the commission were strongly in agreement with the sentiment, I think.
Yeah, I think this is the proper time to refer this item to staff for, bringing up with council to see if they can, take that up, on their agenda, and whether there is support for, say, a work session or joint work session with Planning Commission on this item, that we would have to, talk with.
Well, I was thinking of, we could do it through staff if you like, but maybe the simplest thing would just be a sense of the Planning Commission, a letter that maybe the chair would draft. I would help if you want. Just saying, we recommend, that the council look into this based on concerns that were raised at, this last meeting, and we hope this doesn't keep coming back to us again and again, or some letter to that effect. So is that a reasonable way and simple way to handle it, staff?
That's the simplest way, but I think the best way would be to refer this to staff. The staff could, have this put on the next agenda for Planning Commission. You could vote on it officially and, send it to, that letter to, or whatever you decide, to City Council. That way there's a, an agendized discussion. I think it would probably be beneficial to have a work session to kind of go over those objective standards. But I defer to you. How do you want to handle it?
Feels to me like we're making it more complicated than it needs to be. We're not the ones who decide this. They are, with the City Council. And so we need them to look at it, not us.
Right. I'm just concerned about taking a vote right now without it agendized is,
So how about a consent item for next? How about a consent item, or the equivalent of it, for the next meeting, that is a letter that staff would draft that we can all vote for or against, and then just go straight to council from there? How about that? Simple.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
All right,
So I just want to be clear, staff is drafting the letter based on the discussion today.
Right. So we can put an item on next commission's agenda, which recommends sending the letter to the mayor and city council to consider discussions related to having a minimum parking standard in the form-based code area in light of state law.
But
Yes.
staff is drafting this, saying this is the commission's opinion, or Chair Roche will sign it, because it wouldn't be coming from staff. It'll be coming from the Planning Commission.
So staff,
I just want to be clear. We can
Yes.
draft it, I guess, but it's not appropriate.
staff would draft it. It would come back to the Planning Commission as a consent type of item, the letter, the drafted letter. We would vote on it. That'd be the end of it. It goes to the council after that if it's approved. So you're not
That's fine. I just want to be clear. The letter isn't coming from staff. It will be coming from the Planning Commission. So we'll draft it in that manner.
Yeah, and I'm happy to sign such a letter because I'm very interested in moving this issue forward to City Council.
Yep. That's fine.
Thank you, Commissioner Mendel.
Yep.
Let's see, Commissioner Okenda.
Yeah, just I guess two things there. One is I just wanted to second what Ray said, and Commissioner Bonilla said about our experience with the Tennyson High School students. I feel today that I feel like I am a little disappointed in that vote and what the students told us today. And I think it's just going to be a moment for reflection for me on ways I might have been able to show up better and make that motion stronger and more in favor of anti-displacement policy and goals. And I just would say, I'm also interested in a referral. It may not be necessary, but I guess an announcement related to the affordable housing ordinance. I know that that's generally something that is in the housing division wheelhouse and isn't necessarily a part of the planning staff and like strictly planning commission roles, but I'd love any update if possible on like where that's landed in the strategic roadmap from council and consideration of that. That might just be helpful to have, I don't know, humming in the back of our minds as we continue to see projects that the affordable housing ordinance applies to. It's come up a few times in at least two developments in the last few months. And I'd love to know what the timeline is for that and when we might be able to have an opportunity over the next year or so to talk about that and provide input given the cases we're seeing here. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Goldstein, did you want to add something else?
Hopefully I'll be very brief. It relates to this item about parking. While I'm in agreement with minimal parking standards, I would like to add some words to it. What's the best way to do that? Should I just email Leah with that draft or should we talk about it? I hate to drag this out.
Sure. Why don't you can email it to me and we'll figure someone out to draft it.
Okay.
That would work. I was just gonna say we can't discuss it right now. It's not on the agenda.
Right, okay.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's fine. Okay, good. I only had just a quick logistical question. You know, we received an email about emails for the Planning Commission. I just wondered, what's the expectation on those emails? I mean, do we need to use them? Must we use them? Are you now going forward only going to send information on Planning Commission to those emails? What was the intention there? Can anyone, Leah?
I think that they were for your use, but you don't have to use them.
Okay.
I can clarify with our clerical staff, what their intention was. I don't believe the idea was to shift all business over to the Planning Commission email, but I can double check on that and have Robert let you know sort of what.
That's fine.
I think there are some people that probably will use it a lot and others that might not use it at all. But it's a mechanism for the public to email you without having your personal email, but still you can connect with people and not have to give that out.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I hope everyone got all their comments out. Commissioner Goldstein, were you done? You still have your hands up. Okay, you're done. Okay. All right, great. Well, with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. It is 9:14 p.m. And I thank everybody for your time tonight and have a good evening.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.